Did you get your invite to the Bezos Sanchez wedding? I mean, mine got lost in the mail. Shocker. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. In honor of the Bezos Sanchez wedding of the century, at least in their minds, I wanted to talk about the Jeff Bezos Lauren Sanchez relationship and get into an analysis of that. I actually have mentioned them in a couple of videos previously when I've talked about other couples, but I thought I would do a video just talking about them and analyzing their relationship. And before I get into this, my usual disclaimers: I don't know anybody in this video. I am simply basing my analysis on people's public personas, no idea what they're like behind closed doors. I'm just going by the information that's available to everybody to make my analysis. And also, it's not really about the people I'm talking about in the video. It's really about the lessons that we can take from these celebrities' public personas that we can actually use in our everyday life so we can have happier, healthier lives and relationships. Jeff Bezos Lauren Sanchez relationship. Little backstory for those of you that don't know. Jeff Bezos is a billionaire. He's one of the richest men in the world, and he was married for quite a while. I want to say 25 years or so to his first wife. They have several kids, and he basically left his first wife for Lauren Sanchez, who was also in the process of getting a divorce. Whether or not Bezos and Sanchez were involved with each other while they were officially still married to their prospective partners, that's a little fuzzy. They're both claiming that their marriages were over before they got involved in a relationship with each other. That's still up for debate, but it's not looking like that's what really happened. It's looking like they probably were cheating on their spouses with each other and then ended up together. So each of them have divorced their previous spouses and are getting ready to marry each other. They've been engaged for quite a while, although when people kept saying that their engagement had been going on for a really long time, I thought it had too, based on how long I feel like I've been hearing about this, but it's only actually been about 2 years, I think. I tried Googling it. We all know Google's not 100% accurate, but it looked like it'd been about 2 years. And I mean, 2 years is long for an engagement, but I don't necessarily think it's excessive, especially when you're talking about having a huge over-the-top wedding. Oftentimes those things can take a while, and then also if you are people who are as busy as, you know, Bezos and Sanchez are as far as other things that they're doing, and, you know, them being older. Jeff Bezos is 61 and Lauren Sanchez is 55. So, you know, them being older, they have a lot of things going on in their lives and things like that. They have kids. They're planning an over-the-top wedding. I mean, if it is 2 years that they were engaged, I don't think that's excessive. I mean, oftentimes really long engagements can be a red flag. I think sometimes you have to look at the circumstances as well. So I'm filming this video before their wedding. It'll probably be uploaded just after their wedding. If anything major happens like during their wedding, I might either jump in and do a little update, or I'll do a follow-up video if you guys want me to, if there's any kind of drama that goes on around that. Really, I'm kind of analyzing the kind of their relationship in general, like leading up to the wedding. So the first topic that kind of comes up when you think of Bezos and Sanchez is the idea of cheating. And I mean, that could literally be like a whole series of videos in itself, because there are so many reasons why people cheat and so many different factors. So I'm not going to dive into all of that. Again, we don't know officially if Jeff Bezos was cheating on his wife with Lauren Sanchez. However, it's likely. So let's go under the assumption that he was, because it looks like that's a possibility. Lauren Sanchez is very different than Jeff Bezos' wife. One look at the two of them and you can completely tell that they are very different people. And that's actually really common, particularly with men. If they're going to cheat, they often cheat with somebody who is very different than their wife. There's a lot of different reasons for that, and obviously there's like so many different reasons why people cheat. I know people love to summarize it into one little explanation, but there's various reasons why people cheat. When you see someone who cheats with somebody who is just like very different than their spouse, people often jump to the conclusion that it's because they weren't getting what they needed from their spouse and they decided to find it in somebody else, which is a very simplistic answer, and that is possibly what's going on. It looks a lot like in the Jeff Bezos situation that he has a serious Madonna complex, right? Which is very common in men. Bezos's first wife has the classic wife persona. She was the perfect wife for a man who was going to start his business. She helped him start his business. She is, you know, she's a beautiful, classy, elegant woman. She's intelligent and everything, and like she carries herself like a first wife. Oftentimes men choose a a first wife because they are putting her in the wife category. She will benefit him. I talked about this in my Beyonce video where I talked about her and Jay-Z, and Jay-Z picked Beyonce because she was the woman that fit the image that he wanted to pursue. In Bezos's situation, you know, he was on the road to success. He picked the wife that was going to be the best partner for him in that stage of his life. You know, was there love there? Was there attraction there? Who knows? Like, I'm not in their bedroom, I don't know. But that is very common with men where they pick a wife. It fits their passion, it fits their purpose in life, which is smart to do. I'm not saying that that's not intelligent. However, unfortunately, that's often not the woman that he's actually attracted to. He's picked that woman because she serves a purpose. But his fantasy woman, his mistress type, so to speak, is very different. And unfortunately, too many men, and I think like corn culture definitely reinforces this, is they have women in two categories: the good, the bad, the wife, the mistress. I mean, as I've said in many other videos, and I stand by this, women will never be satisfied being either the wife or the mistress. Women need to be both. Women will never be satisfied in a relationship with a man who is just married her because she fits the wife type, but she's just put in wife category where she just is there to serve his purpose. She also is going to want the man that she's committed to in a relationship to be sexually attracted to her, to desire her. Whereas a mistress is typically not satisfied with being a mistress. She usually will want a commitment. That's often why, and I hate the saying because I hate the concept of a mistress and cheating and everything like that, but there is a saying that a man should treat his wife like his mistress and his mistress like his wife. The reason for that is that the wife knows she's a wife. Like, she knows where she stands as far as being a wife, as far as having that commitment. But she also wants to know that her partner desires her physically, that she is attractive to him, that he still wants her and has a desire for her, because she wants to feel like a woman. She wants to feel like a sensual, desired woman. I mean, most women desire that. Whereas the mistress, I mean, she doesn't always know she's a mistress, depending on what she knows about the man's relationship status, but she knows she's not a wife. And that's why the mistress often needs the man to pretend that, like, the wife just doesn't understand him, or that he's going to leave his wife for her. And that's oftentimes why guys kind of have to lie to the mistress about a future commitment, because the mistress tends to, deep down, and some women deny this, but if you're in an intimate relationship with a man, for most women, eventually you're gonna desire some kind of commitment. You're gonna want to be the one that man chooses. Even if you're not desiring marriage, even if you have like blockages to intimacy or things like that, oftentimes deep down you're gonna want a man to choose you. Now granted, this whole like wife mistress thing is very manipulative. However, what it does is it proves the point that women desire to be both. Women want to be chosen and have the commitment and have that stability of a commitment, but they're also going to want to feel that desire, that passion, that sensuality and that intimacy. And the more that men put women into those categories, the more that women are going to be ultimately unsatisfied in relationships. And if a man can't actually put women in both categories, which is something that he needs to work on, like men need to work on that within themselves, that's their responsibility to work on that. But if a man can't see a woman as both wife and mistress, if he can't actually see women as being like multi-faceted beings, and he has to put women in categories of like the good girl, the bad girl, the wife, the mistress, that kind of thing, he will never have a committed, fulfilling relationship, because he's always going to desire something that he's missing in one woman in another woman. So you see this situation of a man having a wife that is in the wife category and then having a mistress in the mistress category in a lot of public figures. And what often happens with guys that do this is very often the mistress is somebody who is completely different than the wife. She also doesn't bring to his life the stuff that the wife has to bring to his life, because there's certain things that the wife is going to need from her husband, whereas the mistress is not necessarily going to have the same demands and desires because she's in a different situation. This idea of like what they call the Madonna complex, the concept of men putting women into categories of the wife and the mistress and things like that, it's a huge phenomenon. And what often happens, what I suspect happened in the Bezos situation, I talked about this in my video where I was analyzing Trump's relationships with like the Ivana Marla situation. I think you saw this with Don Jr. with his first wife and Kimberly Guilfoyle. A lot of men will choose a mistress that is very different than their wife because it gives them something that they're not getting from their wife. And again, I'm not blaming the wife here, but it's the man seeking something different that he feels drawn to because it's not something he's getting at home, and that's his issue. But they're drawn to that difference. But in many cases, they don't necessarily want to make a commitment to that difference. They just want something different. But what happens is they get caught, and oftentimes the wife will end it. And oftentimes, if it's found out publicly, the man then has to make a commitment or be in a relationship with the mistress to kind of justify that he's just ruined a marriage in order to have his mistress. Don't know 100% if it's happened in all these situations. I think that definitely seemed like it happened with Trump with the Ivana Marla situation. I have a whole video where I dive into that. You know, I think Ivana was probably Trump's soulmate. I think he screwed up by having an affair with Marla, and then when Ivana found out, she was like, done, and good for her. So then he kind of felt like he had to save face and end up marrying Marla, and that marriage obviously didn't work out. And then he ended up marrying Melania. Talk about like generational patterns. Donald Trump Jr., he had a wife for a long time. He ended up with Kimberly Guilfoyle. I don't know for certain if it's been confirmed that that was an affair, but it seemed like it might have been. So then they had to get engaged. Of course, they're not together anymore, but kind of seemed like he had to kind of make sort of a commitment to her publicly and be in a relationship with her because he kind of had to save face because he ended his marriage because he wanted to have an affair. And I don't know if that's really what's going on with the Jeff Bezos situation, but I suspect there's a factor there, where he decided he wanted to have his fun with a mistress and got himself into that situation, and now he's feeling like he has to make this commitment to justify the fact that he ruined his marriage by having this affair. Just speculation, but that is common. And another aspect that I think that women really need to understand about being the other woman or being the second wife or something, and again, this isn't 100% universal, but this is incredibly common. Men don't typically have an affair, run off with another woman, leave a first wife for a second wife or anything when things are going well for them. A lot of times, I think there's this idea like that in the manosphere or even in the world in general that like, ooh, a guy gets to this like successful place in his life and now he feels like he's got all this success and he's feeling good about everything and he just like dumps the first wife and he like upgrades to the second wife. That's oftentimes how men justify it, or like a fantasy that men build up. But if you actually look at things historically, when it comes out that men have mistresses, when men decide to like dump the first wife and end up with a second wife or things like that, that is oftentimes what leads to a man's downfall. And I mean, I think like it can kind of be a chicken or egg situation sometimes, because either he's left the woman that was the first wife who built with him, who was the woman that really was the wind beneath his wings, or you know, that really was the inspiration, the person that helped him, and now she's not there and he's moved on to somebody else. That shift is what kind of makes things go downhill. But I think often what happens is sometimes guys know behind the scenes that things aren't going well for them and their ego can't handle it. So they find themselves another woman, maybe a younger woman or a newer woman that like doesn't necessarily know all of his faults and his flaws. He gets to kind of escape into that because the rest of his life isn't going well. And that usually ends up making his life even worse, because then of course that, if he gets caught, can deteriorate his whole relationship, and oftentimes things kind of snowball from there. If you actually look at an analysis of like Trump's business career, things really took a hit for him business-wise around the time when he left Ivana and ended up marrying Marla. He wasn't doing as well financially at that time period. Was that because he was distracted by having an affair and his divorce happening? Possibly. Could it also be that he wasn't doing as well in that time period and he felt like he needed a mistress to distract him or to boost his ego or something like that? That's a possibility. I don't know that much about Bezos's like specific business strategy, but I think it's probably fair to assume that like Bezos is in a place right now. I'm willing to bet that he's probably not doing as well business-wise as he was before. Possible. I mean, he's getting older. Maybe he's thinking about retiring and not being as active in business. I don't know. Oftentimes, like, like the second wife or having the mistress and ending the marriage and stuff, that's not when men are at their best. I know in Bezos' situation, he didn't go a lot younger or anything, which I'm gonna get into in a minute, but oftentimes I think like younger women who are a little bit maybe more naive or just looking for, you know, an older man to take care of them or support them or whatever, and they kind of become like the second wife, they think that that's like a status thing, when in reality, the second wife is usually getting the guy on his downfall. The first wife gets the husband on his way up. The second wife is usually getting the man on his downfall. So it's not usually actually a status symbol. It's not really as much of a win for most women. And I realize in some cases, like, I mean, you know, if you get a guy who's rich and successful enough, even on his downfall, he might still be doing well. So you might be like, okay, that's fine. But just know that like if you're like the younger woman or like the mistress or like the new woman, you're usually not getting the man when he's at his best. He's usually going to another woman, particularly a younger woman, or a woman who's just there for sexual activity or something like that. Like, he usually goes to that woman when he's low and needs an ego boost, not when he's doing well. Now, I have seen people talk about the fact that, well, at least Jeff Bezos picked a woman, second wife, so to speak, who is age appropriate. And I will say that's valid. However, and I heard somebody else say this, but it makes a lot of sense. Oftentimes we think of, like, I think like regular people who aren't in the sort of billionaire circle or whatever. And there's also like a message in like kind of the manosphere or like the new money guys or things like that or whatever, or men who are kind of just starting to come into money or things like that, that if a guy gets enough money, he's just gonna get himself like the youngest, hottest, sexiest, naive, submissive, unintelligent woman, and like that's his prize, so to speak. And you don't see as many billionaires doing that as you would think. It happens. I'm not saying it doesn't. However, I heard someone say this and it made a lot of sense, that they were talking about having a conversation with like somebody in like the billionaire circle, like a man who's a billionaire, and how he was explaining that like when you get to a certain level of like wealth, and I think this especially applies to like billionaires who are, you know, relatively self-made, like men in particular who have really had to work at succeeding and have succeeded at a really high level, you have to have a certain level of competitiveness in order to get to that level. And oftentimes if you are like a very competitive, business-minded male billionaire, dating like a 19-year-old like uneducated woman who really hasn't experienced life very much, not really a challenge. She's never been on a yacht before. Of course she's gonna be impressed with your yacht. She'd be impressed with a yacht that was half that size. Like, it's not that hard to win over a really young, naive, inexperienced woman. However, a woman who may be a little bit older, not older than him, but like a woman who's like lived life, and also a woman who has dated or been married to like other billionaires or other wealthy, successful men, are a bigger challenge. And a man winning over a woman like that would be considered more successful, because like this woman's already been on a yacht. She's already traveled the world. But like if she likes your yacht, then like that means you've got something. That means you've achieved something that has won her over. The reality is weak men need really young, naive women that can easily be fooled in order to pull off their game. Whereas very highly successful men that have had to work hard to achieve success and have a level of competitive drive to them, they're gonna see a very like easy, young, naive woman as like not much of a challenge. To them, the actual status is to get a woman who has already lived life, has already seen it all, has probably already dated other very high profile, you know, powerful, competitive, successful, wealthy men. Because if she's impressed by him, it means something. It means more. I mean, that's why the message that like women should just be like young and uneducated and dumb, like that doesn't really work when it comes to finding a man that actually has achieved anything in life, because those men are going to be very competitive and they're not going to appreciate an easy woman. I'm not talking about like easy sexually, but I'm talking about like easy as in like a woman that just is very easily impressed by him. So if a woman is very easily impressed by a man, doesn't really have to do anything to impress the woman, like that might give him a temporary ego fix, but he's gonna start to be like, oh, so she's just impressed by anything. He's not gonna feel like he actually had to achieve anything to impress her. It's not gonna mean as much to him. Men thrive in challenge. And I know a lot of men claim they don't like challenge, but they actually thrive in challenge. Men don't like things that come easily to them. That's actually interesting. On a side note, I saw a video of this guy or something that was like talking about how he'd spent all this money on a date with this woman and she didn't even put out or something. And I mean, there's like a whole lot of layers of that you could unpack in that conversation, but I'm just gonna focus on this one aspect of this. If a man did spend all that money on this woman and she did put out, he would assume that she puts out with everybody and he wouldn't actually want to keep seeing her. He may keep using her for sex, but he would never put her in a relationship category because he'd be like, oh, so she can be bought. And if I can buy her, then any man can buy her. So he's not actually going to respect her. So men can complain that women won't put out when they spend a lot of money on her. But at the end of the day, if she did put out when he spent a lot of money on her, he would not want to be in a relationship with her and wouldn't respect her because he would know that there's a price on her and that she'll put out for any man who's willing to pay that price. And look, I know there's a lot of women who are gonna make the argument that like, well, why do we care what men think and blah, 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 whatever. I mean, I'm not telling you what to do, ladies. Again, it's your body. You do what you wanna do. But I just think it's really important for women to understand that sleeping with a man is never gonna get respect. It's never gonna get you respect. So if you ultimately want a man to respect you and make a commitment to you, you have to have respect for yourself. Because if you don't have respect for yourself and you're showing a man that you can be bought and you can be purchased, because you cannot have self-respect and be bought, then you can't expect a man to respect you. It would be great if we all just respected each other, but that's just not how the world works, right? I mean, like, as a woman, you need to have respect for yourself. And look, if a man is out there with that dating mentality, I realize he's not worth dating anyway. Like, he has work he needs to do on himself and his image of women and his image of relationships and things like that. I'm not saying this is a guy you should be getting involved with or anything like that, but you shouldn't be giving him access to your body anyway. So like, you can write him off. But again, that's where that conflict is. Like, men need to know they had to work for you because they have to feel like they've had to work hard to achieve you, or else they're gonna feel like, well, then any man can have you, and he's not gonna value you. So when you have like the Jeff Bezos Lauren Sanchez situation, Lauren Sanchez has already been married to a billionaire. I believe she also has a kid with like a professional football player. She's been in high profile relationships with like powerful men who've been in the media and things like that. Bezos impressing Lauren Sanchez, or like getting Lauren Sanchez, is a bigger achievement, even though she's an older woman. It's because she has that life experience and because she's kind of been there, done that with other wealthy, successful men, is probably part of the appeal for a Jeff Bezos, because he is obviously a very competitive man. He's a very successful man. Him winning over some like 19-year-old, like freshly new adult who's just kind of like new to the world and, you know, is kind of naive and stuff, like, she's easily won over by, you know, just throwing some money around, or, you know, throwing around a yacht or something like that, and it becomes not a challenge. And men thrive in challenge. So, you know, it's important for women to remember that. Like, oftentimes men will say they want a woman who's like easy and is my peace and all this kind of stuff, whereas like a man is never going to truly appreciate a woman that makes his life easier. You know, guys always say they want a woman that makes their life easier. When a woman makes a man's life easier, he becomes complacent, he becomes lazy. He'll usually end up going after a woman who makes his life more complicated. And I'm not putting the blame on the woman. I'm not putting the blame on the woman in this situation. I want to be very clear. Cheating, as far as I'm concerned, is always the fault of the person who cheats. I'm just talking about the circumstances here. Is that if you are in a relationship with a man and you're constantly making his life easier and making his life more peaceful, men will become complacent, and because men thrive in challenge, sometimes they will cheat literally just to make life more difficult so that they have a challenge they have to overcome. I know that's sick. It's sick, and I'm not justifying it, because there's a lot of layers to reasons why people cheat, and there's usually rarely just one reason why people, you know, have a certain behavior. But that's oftentimes why sort of like the peaceful, like good wife gets cheated on, is because she's made his life very easy and peaceful because that's what she thought her role was supposed to be, and that's what he claimed he wanted. But that's not really what men want. Like, they need a challenge, they need something to stir up their life, they need problems they need to fix or things they have to overcome, or they become complacent. And I mean, I'm not saying that that's a justification for cheating at all. I don't justify cheating in any way, but that is sometimes why men go that route. And again, that's not on the woman, that's for the man to heal. The woman just unfortunately has to deal with the consequences of this. But I want this to be a wake-up call for women that think that they have to be like the good wife. They have to be a man's peace. They have to make sure that his life has no challenges and has no struggles. That's not going to guarantee like a peaceful relationship. Like, that's not going to guarantee that a man is going to be faithful. Like, none of those things are going to guarantee that. So if you feel like you are trying to like tiptoe around and you have to be a man's peace and never disrupt anything or anything like that, like, that's not a way to live. That could be a whole video in itself. With the Bezos Sanchez wedding and everything, which is supposedly this incredibly over the top, like big money, like wedding of the century kind of event, right? Celebrity studded and all this kind of stuff. I've had a theory for a while now, and it's not 100%, but I would say it's a theory that almost always plays out in reality. There might be a few instances where it doesn't pan out, but the vast majority of the time this theory pans out, is the more dramatic and over the top the wedding, the worse the marriage. I'd say most of the big like over the top weddings of the century ended in divorce. I think this holds true for like celebrity relationships, although most celebrity relationships don't pan out all that well. As far as big over the top weddings, I think it's a little bit different when we're talking about, say, like, for example, royal weddings, because you often associate that with like weddings of the century and things like that. But that sometimes is a little bit more complex because they're usually over the top weddings, not necessarily because it's what the couple wanted, but it's usually more like pomp and circumstance and like what's required of them based on certain traditions and things like that. So I don't think necessarily that royal weddings always completely fall under this theory that I have. However, I don't really know that much about, because I was so little when Charles and Diana got married and stuff, but I don't really know that much about like what the process was leading up to their wedding. But that was obviously like the wedding of the century at a certain point, and their relationship obviously didn't last. However, you know, William and Kate, at least as of filming this, I know there's rumors and stuff, but as of filming this, like, their relationship is still together, and they had kind of like an over the top wedding of the century. However, I got the impression, at least from what I watched of that wedding and the coverage of that and stuff, that William and Kate would have had a much more like low-key, simpler wedding, and they tried to keep what they did have as simple and reserved as possible considering the circumstances, but like they had to have things a certain way because of the tradition and the responsibilities and things like that. Meghan and Harry, as of right now, are still together, but I would say they probably fell into that category as well. Like, they had to have a more over-the-top wedding because of the circumstances of, you know, Harry's royal stature and things like that. But like, who knows what it would have been like had it just been the two of them making the decisions. And they're a complicated couple, so, and I have a video about the two of them, so I'm not going to get into that here. But as of right now, like, they're still together, so I still think my theory still holds up, because again, it's couples that want something a little bit more low-key, even if they don't get that. I've seen this like in everyday life too, is the people that I know that have had the really like over-the-top dramatic, like, you know, princess weddings and things like that, like, tend to be the worst relationships. In fact, I remember very distinctly having a friend who was getting married, and I was in the wedding and stuff, and I couldn't understand it because she was like one of the biggest tomboys I knew and wasn't a girly girl at all. In fact, used to like joke around with me all the time, like playfully make fun of me because I was so much girlier than she was and stuff. And when she got married, she was doing this whole like Cinderella princess themed wedding, and I remember being like, this is not her personality at all. Like, I did not know where this was coming from. This was her vision, and I was like, I'm not gonna criticize, like, she can do what she wants and stuff. So I wasn't being critical or anything, but I remember having a conversation with someone because she was in a horrible relationship. Like, I won't even get into how bad her relationship was. Her and I lost touch after the wedding, but I've heard that they're not still together. But like, it was a terrible relationship, and I wasn't as involved with planning the wedding because I despised the groom, and she knew that, and it was a whole thing, whatever. I won't get into all the details here, but I remember having a conversation with somebody about how somebody outside of the wedding situation and being like, I just don't understand like where this whole like princess wedding thing is coming from. Like, that's like, she doesn't even like Disney princesses or anything like that. And somebody said to me, they were like, she gets to be a princess for one day. The rest of her relationship, she's gonna be treated like a peasant. And I was like, whoa. It was true. It was sadly absolutely true because of the man she was marrying, and I think everybody knew it, but she wasn't ready to see it yet, and that's just the way it was. But yeah, it was really eye-opening for me that I think oftentimes people are in bad relationships, they have really over-the-top weddings, partly to justify it to people. Like, well, why would I have this big over-the-top wedding if my relationship wasn't perfect? So like, obviously we have a perfect relationship, like they're trying to convince themselves as well as other people. But I think oftentimes, and especially with women, you sometimes want to have that like princess day because that's the only day we're gonna get to be a princess. Like, that's the only day we're gonna get to be treated like a queen. This is the only day we're actually gonna be put up on a pedestal like that and have it be our day, because we end up signing up for a relationship that is really not that good, and we know it. So we're so desperate to hang on to like that one like princess wedding day because that's all we have. It's one of those things where people that have these like big over-the-top weddings, in the same way I would say that people that are like so heavily like in your face with how great their relationship is on social media, are usually people that are overcompensating. Like, they're usually people that have terrible relationships and are just so desperate to prove to the world and themselves that their relationship is good. I have seen some people analyzing the Bezos Sanchez relationship and saying that they were so hot and heavy on social media originally and like they've been less so over time, and how that might be a red flag. I don't necessarily think that is so much a red flag, because I do think sometimes it is normal early on in a relationship to really kind of post a lot because you're excited about something being new, and then like as the relationship goes along, you're like kind of settling into life together. So that, I mean, that could be a red flag because maybe people are like not feeling as into each other. Can be, but not a guaranteed one. And you know, a lot of people do criticize Lauren Sanchez for really loving the spotlight and loving the attention, which she obviously does. And I don't actually think that's a bad thing. I know it bothers a lot of people when people really love the spotlight and love attention. I don't think it's inherently a bad thing to love the spotlight and love attention. Some people love it, some people don't. I think it's really more of a problem if you're willing to do things for the spotlight that are like not good and not healthy and, you know, are actually detrimental to yourself and others. I mean, I think like what you're willing to do for the spotlight is actually more of a concern than just loving the spotlight. Because I think some people just love the spotlight, some people don't. It's just what it is. It's hard to know if Bezos loves the spotlight or not, because I've seen a lot of people trying to analyze like their body language and are saying things like that they don't think that Bezos is as into Lauren Sanchez as she's into him, or like whatever, people are analyzing that. It's hard to know how much he's comfortable with the spotlight and how much he isn't, and some of like his being uncomfortable might be that he's just not as like outgoing or not as comfortable in the spotlight as she is. I mean, who knows? And I mean, you could make the argument, well, he wouldn't have picked her and gotten involved with her if he didn't love the spotlight, because she's clear about loving the spotlight. I mean, it's not like she hides it or anything. However, unfortunately, and this is common with most people, oftentimes people will get into relationships with somebody not necessarily for the whole person, but you know, because of some aspect of them, but they don't like other aspects, and it's possible that he's tolerating it because he's getting something else from her. I mean, we can take a guess what that probably is, and I'll get into that in a minute, but he might just be thinking like, oh, well, maybe once we're married, or maybe when she's older or whatever. Like, I mean, that I don't know, I'm just speculating with this, but I think that this is an important lesson, is that, you know, two people who have different ideas about how public they're gonna be, like, they can make a relationship work, but it is more challenging. If one person loves the spotlight and one person hates it, if you can't actually find a balance and a way to work that out so that you don't get either person resenting the other person, you're gonna have a problem, because resent is rust for a relationship. It will deteriorate it. You know, two people that love the spotlight, it can work, but they can also be competitive with each other. Two people that hate the spotlight can hide off in seclusion together, and that might be able to work, but you might get a little bit too comfortable being in isolation and maybe not actually get out in the world and stuff, and you might not have someone to like motivate you to like actually like get out there and live life. So, you know, that has pluses and minuses. If you have one person that loves the spotlight and you have one person that hates the spotlight, I mean, it can be more challenging, but it's not impossible, as long as you make sure that both people are compromising with each other in a sense, so that neither person becomes super uncomfortable and resents the other one. Again, because resentment will destroy a relationship. So it's not impossible, it's just, it's something you have to be aware of when you have people that are on different pages when it comes to how public you're gonna be, especially if you are a public figure. I mean, but this can happen in everyday life, just with people you know, just like regular people who just one person may want to post a lot more on social media and one person might not. And there isn't like a right or wrong answer to this, but you have to make sure that you're working things out so that both people feel comfortable with the situation and don't end up building resentment towards the other one. Whether it be that the person who's more private is like holding the other person back, or whether it is that the person who is, you know, more public is actually like uncomfortably dragging the private person into the spotlight. You just have to make sure that you figure out how to work that out, and if you can't work it out, it's not a good sign for your relationship. Now, it wouldn't be one of my videos if I didn't start talking about a woman's plastic surgery, apparently, because it's just become so prevalent in so much of my videos now, because it's just so common in the world today. And not even just like just plastic surgery, but this like excessive plastic surgery. And Lauren Sanchez is like the poster child for having way too much plastic surgery. I don't know which is worse, her or Kylie Jenner. I still think Kylie Jenner's worse. I know I go after Kylie a lot, but I think because Kylie's so young. I mean, Lauren Sanchez, as much as I think her plastic surgery is insane, like it's just insane. Like you have to be mentally ill to get that much plastic surgery. And I don't justify it, but I will say that I do think that probably the start of it for her, or maybe not the very start, but some of it stemmed a little bit from, because she's 51, so she's not old. At 45, I'm not gonna call a 51-year-old old by any means. But I can kind of understand that as women get older, some women, especially women who have felt like a lot of their value was in their physical appearance, could desperately try to hang on to their youth by getting plastic surgery to try to keep that youthful image that they had. Now, does plastic surgery really do that? I realize that there's a lot of like new innovations happening in plastic surgery that are kind of reversing the clock in kind of a creepy way, but you know, I don't really think it really recaptures the youth, but I think some women think that it does. And look, if you look at young pictures of Lauren Sanchez, she's stunning, like absolutely stunning. Now, it's interesting because when I look at young pictures of her, and she was like a TV news anchor and things like that, so the chances that she was all natural even back then, most people that end up on TV tend to have something done. But if she did have any work done when she was young, it was very natural looking. Like she looked like just a woman who could naturally look like that. She's just excessively beautiful. I mean, she was stunning. Now she looks like, I know I use this phrase and I know people hate this, but she looks like a sex toy blow up doll. Like she really does. Like she looks like if someone was going to make a model of a blow up doll as a sex toy, that's what they would make. And Kylie looks the same way, Kim looks like, so many of these celebrity women are looking like they are just sex toy blow-up dolls. It's so terrifying. I mean, I've talked about this before, that I really do think that this is normalizing AI women when they start switching corn over to AI, which I know people are gonna be like, well, then at least women aren't gonna be exploited. And that is a whole rabbit hole that is not gonna go well for women. It's like trying to eliminate women, and I could do a whole video on that, and I'm not gonna go into that, but it's not gonna go well for women if this continues this way. However, let's get into Lauren Sanchez. I mean, I know some people are gonna say it's her body, her choice. It's just so sad to see a woman who obviously was stunning make herself, again, into a sex toy blow-up doll. It's ridiculous. I can't take her seriously. I can't. And it's making me not take him seriously, because it's like, he's choosing this. I know there's some theories that people have that like once men get to a certain level of like money and power, that all they really need a woman for is simply for sex. So they're just gonna find a woman who's just showing up for sex. That's all they need her for. And I mean, I guess I think that's creepy. I've seen debates as to whether or not people think that like she's getting this work done because she wants to and because she's got the money and, you know, ability to do this and stuff like that, or if like this is something that like Bezos wants her to get because he's thinking, I mean, it's typical kind of like geek revenge, like, you know, hey, I was a geek growing up and now I've got this woman who's gonna be a sex toy blow up doll for me. And like these tech guys, like it's similar to me, like a little bit different, but similar to like, I have a video about Elon Musk and stuff like that, and like his obsession with having kids, and they're all through IVF and that kind of technology. And like some of these like billionaire tech guys, like, I mean, some of them might be brilliant and that's how they got to where they are, but like some of them are like, whew. I don't know that much about, like I did an analysis of Elon and like his upbringing and why I think he's the way he is. I don't know that much about Bezos and like his actual upbringing and stuff like that, so I don't know that much about that, but it does kind of seem like he's, you know, like a geek that now got himself a an AI sex toy blow up doll, and I mean, now he's gonna marry her, and it's like, it's the whole aspect of it is creepy to me. I know there's gonna be people, and I hear the arguments all the time, Lauren Sanchez is an intelligent, accomplished woman, and we should be respecting her. You know, she's a pilot, she was a news anchor, she's written books, and like, we need to respect her. And okay, here's the thing, I'm probably gonna get some hate for this, but I'm just gonna say it. As a woman who worked for many, many years in a male-dominated industry, I was in stand-up comedy, which is a very, very misogynistic industry, and was frequently told that I was too pretty to be funny, or I constantly had to like tone down my body and tone down my look in order to be accepted and things like that. I completely empathize with a woman who is, you know, smart, intelligent, accomplished, and she's being discredited for her looks, her appearance, her sex appeal, or anything like that. And I know people are going to start arguing jealousy, but I'll be the first person to jump in if a woman just happens to be beautiful or happens to be sexy, but she's also accomplished and intelligent, and she's being discredited. Like, I'll be the first person to jump in and defend her. To a point. Like, there has to be a point where as a woman, you're like, if you're not even gonna help yourself and you're going to make yourself into a sex toy blow-up doll, like, you can't really start arguing that people aren't looking at you like a intelligent, respectable businesswoman or something like that. Like, there has to be a line there. You know what I mean? Like, and for people that are gonna say that that's sexist, I would argue that I would feel the same way about a man. If he were to show up, I mean, most men don't necessarily cover themselves in plastic surgery, but if I met a guy who looked like he had really overdone the plastic surgery, I would really question his judgment as well. But also, like, for example, if a man shows up in a room looking like a homeless man, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna be your surgeon, or I'm gonna be your lawyer or something, I'd be like, no, you're not. Like, there has to be a point where, you know, you have to show up in the world and represent yourself the way that you want people to see you. I mean, there has to be a line there. And again, if you just happen to be a beautiful woman, you happen to be a sexy woman, but you're still great at your job, you're still showing up as a professional and things like that, if you get discriminated against because of your appearance, I'll be the first person to jump in and be like, that's discrimination, that's not fair. However, if you are choosing as a woman to make yourself into a sex toy blow-up doll, and you now look like, you know, a wax figure of yourself or something, like, I'm gonna question your judgment, I'm gonna question your intelligence, I'm gonna question your mental stability if you're willing to put yourself on a surgeon's table and have them, you know, cut you up like a piece of meat and, you know, stuff silicone in you and shove you full of, you know, fillers and filters and suck stuff out and move stuff here and move stuff there. Like, I'm gonna question your intelligence and your mental stability, because I don't think that that's normal or healthy behavior at all. It's gonna discredit your accomplishments. It is. I'm all for women being respected when they have the accomplishments, but there is something to the fact that you have to show up in the world and present yourself as somebody that is intelligent and mentally stable in order for people to take you seriously. And I mean, I go back to, I know like Lauren Sanchez got a lot of crap for her inauguration outfit and people thought it was too sexy, and then some people were like, no, we're not gonna whatever. I mean, I didn't dislike her outfit. If you're not familiar, she had like a suit on, she had like a lace bra showing, she had a lot of cleavage showing, and again, I actually didn't think that was a bad outfit. I just didn't think it was appropriate for the inauguration, for that environment. You know, I'm all for women, you know, wanting to show off their body or being, you know, sexy or sensual or, you know, express themselves with style and things like that. But you also have to, there's a time and a place, you know, like you're not going to wear a clubbing outfit to church on Sunday, like, or you shouldn't, you know what I mean? Like there's just like a time and a place to wear certain things in society, and you can, you know, express yourself with fashion, and you know, you can show off your body and things like that. But I do think that you also have to take into consideration the environment you're in and, you know, how you want to show up in the world. And you just, I mean, that's just things you need to consider. Do I think that Bezos and Lauren Sanchez are going to last? No. How long they're going to be together? Don't know. I mean, I'm usually of the belief that if somebody cheats with someone, I mean, it's actually very uncommon for someone to cheat with somebody, to cheat on their spouse and actually end up marrying the person that they cheated with. It happens, but it's not common, and it's also very uncommon for those relationships to last. And I think, unfortunately, if Bezos did cheat on his wife with Lauren Sanchez, which there's a lot of indications that he did, and if he did it because he wanted something more exciting, or she brought something to his life that his wife wasn't bringing to his life or whatever. I'm not justifying the infidelity, but I'm just saying, like, if that was the root of like what led him to decide to cheat. Once Lauren Sanchez becomes the wife, like, and I actually think that might be one of the reasons why she's getting so much plastic surgery to kind of make herself into this like sex toy blow up doll, because I think she knows at a certain point, once she becomes the wife, she's not going to be in the mistress category anymore. And it's very common for a guy to be like, oh, so now she's fallen into the wife category, now I got to keep my eye out for a mistress. Like, that's a very common pattern, right? If you have a guy who puts women into the wife mistress category, if you become the mistress but you desire to be the wife, once you become the wife, he's gonna go looking for a mistress because he's now moved you into the wife category. And I think oftentimes, like, even guys can trick themselves into that, and they're thinking like, oh, well, the mistress is giving me something that the wife's not giving me, so I'll make her the wife and now I'll have everything. When it's like, well, once she becomes the wife, you're probably not going to be able to see her as the mistress anymore, and you're going to go looking for the mistress because now she's in the wife category. I actually think that that might be one of the reasons why Lauren Sanchez is getting so much work done, is because she's like so desperate to try to keep herself in that mistress category because she thinks that that's what's keeping him, and it might actually be what's keeping him. But if she shifts into the wife category, which most women will once they become a wife, and you have to go into the everyday things, like you can't live in that kind of like sexual fantasy anymore, because once you become the wife, like reality sets in. The mistress can live in the fantasy world, the wife has to live in reality. And you know, and maybe Lauren Sanchez is in on this whole thing to the point where she's like, let's just get in, let's get the prenup done, where I know I only got to stick around for a little while and then I get out and I get some money. The reality is that Jeff Bezos' first wife got half of his money, as she should, because she helped him build all of it, so that money is rightfully hers. But Lauren Sanchez didn't help him build anything. I mean, I'm assuming they probably have a prenup situation. She might just be like, I'm gonna be in this for all I can get, and then I'll get out, and then I'll get what I want. I don't know. But unfortunately, it does seem like she's playing on the fact that he's in this like fantasy mistress world. Once she shifts into being the wife and reality sets in, he's probably gonna start looking around for a mistress, because he's going to want the fantasy, because he went for a mistress in the first place, I'm guessing probably to escape reality. That's the big issue, is that wife lives in reality, mistress can live in fantasy. And I mean, that's not really fair to women either, because sometimes the wife wants to live in fantasy, you know? I mean, sometimes the mistress wants to live in reality. I mean, I'm not justifying mistresses, but like, again, that's where you get a conflict. So no, I don't think that the Bezos Sanchez relationship is going to work. Whether she knows that it's not going to work and she's just in this for all she can get and she's doing this strategically, I don't know. Maybe she is, maybe she's not. Maybe she thinks this is a long term and maybe she doesn't. You know, I don't know. But the fact that they're doing the over-the-top wedding, which is usually a sign that they're overcompensating for something, the fact that she started out as a mistress and is now going to become the wife is not a good sign. The fact that she's getting so much work done and so much plastic surgery, indication that there's something going on there. That's not a normal, healthy mental state at all. The fact that they seem like they very possibly could have different ideas about how public they should be and things like that, like, all signs are indicating this relationship is not gonna last. So, you know, honestly, they'll both be fine. Like, they're both very wealthy, and I'm sure that they'll leave the relationship wealthy, and, you know, they'll be fine. I do think that the over-the-top wedding and stuff, like, people aren't taking to it as well and getting excited about it as much, because it's not really in line with the times. Like, the fact that the economy is so bad and that people are struggling so much, and a lot of these, like, over the top, you know, Lauren Sanchez spending a lot of time with the Kardashians, like, that image and everything, like, there was a time period where people were, like, not wealthy, but they weren't necessarily constantly living in a state of survival, where, you know, watching shows or social media and stuff of people with the over the top luxury lifestyles kind of felt fascinating, where people are struggling for survival. I think they're not turning to that as much. They're starting to resent people that have that kind of over-the-top wealth. So I don't really think that people are as excited about this Sanchez Bezos wedding, because it's just not really in line with the times right now as far as like where people are mentally. But again, they'll be fine. So this isn't really about them. Really do hope that there's some lessons that we can learn so that we can actually like take some of these lessons into our own lives so we can have happier, healthier lives and relationships. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you have any thoughts on them as a couple, or, you know, when this is up, their wedding probably has happened. So if you want to make any notes about their wedding or anything like that, or anything you want to talk about, or any other video requests or couples you want me to analyze or anything like that, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you, and I love your video suggestions. Honestly, any engagement on this channel really does help to boost it in the algorithm so more people can get this message. If you want to check out my guided journals, my Recovering Pick Me Girl guided journal is so great for healing your desperation for a relationship, which can actually either make you okay with not being in a relationship, or can actually help you to let go of the desperation for a relationship, so you're more likely to get into a healthy relationship when one comes along. Also, if you want to tap into your dark feminine energy, which is really great for, you know, setting boundaries and stepping into your own solidarity as a feminine being, check out the Dark Feminine Energy Guided Journal. They're both available on Amazon. Links are in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.